Hello, everyone. Welcome. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. My name is Pauline de Guzman, and I'm the Manager of International Student Services here at ISPO. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. As you all know, on July 24th, the Student in Exchange Visitor Program, or SEVP, released temporary procedural adaptations regarding COVID-19 and fall 2020. Today's webinar will focus on the updates presented within that guidance and how it impacts our newly admitted as well as our continuing students. Presenting alongside me today, my colleagues Dulce Amor El Dorado, Director of the International Students and Programs Office, our Assistant Director, Tricia Chan Schuler, our Assistant Director, Gabriela Hoffman, as well as our Manager of Student Experience and Engagement, Grace Fuller. Also joining us this morning, we have our colleagues from Graduate Division, Tiffany Swiderski, Courtney Aguila, as well as Casey Cashett. So you'll be hearing from them as well later throughout our presentation. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First, you're on listen-only mode, so you can hear us, but we can't hear you. Second, we're recording, so you'll be able to view this webinar at iwebinars.ucsd.edu. And lastly, we'll leave some time at the end for some questions. And I'd like to thank you all in advance for submitting some questions that we'll make sure that we answer today. If you think of questions after the webinar, no problem. You can always contact us directly by email, so we'll provide our contact information later as well. Okay, agenda. Today, our team will share current immigration policies impacting international students, campus and ISPO advocacy efforts, what's being done, and what advisors can do to help. We'll go over updates to how the current guidance impacts newly admitted students and also planning for fall in regards to their immigration documents, enrollment, employment, and travel. We'll also share updates and impacts for continuing students returning for the fall, tell you a little bit more also about ISPO's orientation format this year, and then save some time at the end for your questions. So we have quite a bit to cover, so we'll go ahead and jump right in, and I'll pass it over to Dulce to go over current immigration policies.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. Hi, everyone. What I wanted to go ahead and do is just give you the latest updates on some of the immigration policies and travel restrictions that are still in place for many of our international students and scholars. So the first one, the State Department still continues to implement phased resumption of visa services at many of the U.S. embassies and consulates around the world. Please continue to encourage your students to check the local websites for availability and status of services. What ISPO is telling our students is that they can enter the United States until October 16, which is the end of the add drop period after the end of week 2. If a student is unable to arrive by that time, we will then be encouraging them to follow up with their departments, if they're graduate students, or if they are undergraduate students, to follow up with their colleges regarding admission and enrollment options. Regarding the travel restrictions, there are no changes. So the 5 geographic location COVID-19 presidential proclamations and the 2 COVID-19 labor market proclamations that suspend entry of certain non-immigrants are still in effect. So your students can check the ISPO website for all of this information. But again, there are no changes, and those travel restrictions are still in place. Those travel restrictions were issued by executive order by the White House. So again, all of those restrictions are still in place. The fourth item here is the Office of Foreign Asset Control, sanctioned countries. We did notify and identify students that were from sanctioned countries of Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Syria, and the Crimea region of the Ukraine. The US government regulates transactions and services with these specific countries. So there are license requirements for certain types of online study or remote work for students or nationals of these countries, and then if they're located in these regions. Again, we encourage these students to follow up with departments because it may then impact their ability to enroll and take classes online or to work remotely. So those are the updates that I have for now. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tricia Chan Schuler, the Assistant Director of Student Services.
Great, thank you, Dulce. So I'm going to recap the July 24th guidance. On July 24th, SEVP provided guidance based on the operational model of schools in the U.S. For institutions with a hybrid modality, like UC San Diego, that will offer both in-person and remote coursework, newly admitted students for the fall 2020 term that are outside of the U.S. will need to be enrolled in a course with an in-person component to request entry to the U.S. SEVP also reconfirmed that continuing students that were inside the U.S. as of March 9th, 2020, which is when the original SEVP guidance was released, are eligible to continue to enroll in a fully remote course load. We will go into further detail on the enrollment and entry guidance for new admits and continuing students later in this webinar. UC Legal has also provided guidance on the research and independent study courses at UCSD. According to UC Legal, international students should be able to meet the requirement stated in the July 24th SEVP guidance that their coursework not be 100% online through taking an independent study or research course that includes an in-person component that is integral to the completion of the course. UC Legal and ISPO recommends that the in-person component be well documented and that the student and professor be able to clearly articulate the necessity of the in-person component. However, there is some risk that UC Customs and Border Protection, CBP, would not allow entry based on the independent study or research course. Therefore, it may be helpful for the student to have documentation about the in-person component of the course to show CBP if needed. This documentation could be a course summary or a syllabus or letter from the campus or department verifying the in-person component. So what counts to meet the in-person component? So at UCSD, this would be a course that is identified as a hybrid course, a course that is in-person, or the research and independent study courses. Okay, and now I'll pass it back on to Dulce, who will talk about what we're doing as a campus to assist our international students.
Okay, thank you, Tricia. So one of the items that we are continuing to do is support our international students who are able to get a visa appointment and therefore are trying to still arrive for the fall 2020 term. ISPO has issued, in collaboration with the Registrar's Office, a support letter to assist with the visa application and the travel or reentry process. Students have direct access to this document through ISPO's iPortal system. Students can just download that document. It's a PDF that they can use. The second thing is enrollment in a required in-person or hybrid course. So as Tricia mentioned, this requirement is for new students that are newly admitted for fall 2020. As many of you know, ISPO sent out an announcement yesterday through the UAC and ODAPA listservs and the graduate coordinator listservs. Institutional Research has developed a spreadsheet that lists all of the in-person and hybrid courses that are available for fall. This document can be used by college advisors and departments to identify in-person and hybrid courses that are available. Institutional Research will update that spreadsheet every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so 3 times a week. The only thing is that that particular spreadsheet is a view-only document, but that tool is available for all of you to use. In addition, ISPO continues to send out weekly announcements for all of our new and continuing students and also our campus partners. So I hope that many of you are able to see the ISPO announcements either directly through the UAC, ODAPA, or the graduate coordinator listservs. In addition, all of those announcements are also being sent to all of the department deans, co-chairs, department chairs, and faculty advisors. So hopefully that'll be a way for us to disseminate information. Most of our updates will be available on our website as well. We've created a new vanity URL. It's called iupdates.ucsd.edu. There you'll find quick links to all of the FAQ documents that we've been updating, all of the immigration policy updates, and helpful guides that will help you when advising international students. And of course, all of the webinars that we've been conducting are available on iwebinars.ucsd.edu. We'll be continuing to post the recordings so that way you can reference them after each of the webinars. I'll go ahead and turn it over now, I believe Pauline or Tricia.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk about some updates now. Thanks, Dulce, for new admit. So let me introduce now our Assistant Director of Student Experience and Engagement, Gabriela Hoffman.
Great. Thank you, Pauline. So as Dulce mentioned, we are working hard to support our students who are either entering this fall or who are planning to study remotely for the fall and attempt entry in the winter, or just fully defer their programs to a later start date, be that in winter or spring or potentially fall of next year. As you may have seen in recent communication, we've been letting our students know about this for the last month or so. We are asking that all students who need any kind of adjustments made to their documents, whether that is travel remarks added if they are attempting to enter for the fall and they need that extra support on their I-20, whether it's a student who needs their program dates adjusted because they are going to enter in the winter or later. We've asked all students to please apply by August 28th. That deadline is tomorrow, so that we can assist our students as quickly as possible. And we do know that students who are requesting true deferrals, they do need additional documentation as evidence from their department that states whether or not they are allowed to defer their program to either winter, spring, or fall. We are requiring that students upload this information. It can be a very simple email or electronic notification or letter from the department to let the student know that this has been approved. So we're asking departments to please try to process these as soon as possible so the student can upload this to their iPortal application and we can make the appropriate adjustments to their documents. We know for undergraduate students, this process can be a little bit more lengthy because finalized transcripts need to come in and be verified. So we will, in both cases, we can accept these requests from students to adjust their program start dates after tomorrow, but wherever possible, we are encouraging submission by tomorrow because it is really important that we get these done now that we are 30 days out from the beginning of fall. To help facilitate the process, if you do have a large number of students in your department who are requesting deferrals, please go ahead and send an Excel, a shared secure list to me, and we'll share my email address at the end of the presentation. We can help facilitate doing these deferrals more quickly if we have that information from you and if that's a little bit easier. So we'll share that information at the end too to help facilitate that process. From here then, I will go ahead and pass it back to Pauline to go over fall 2020 plans.
Perfect. Thanks, Gabi. All right. So I know that we've published quite a few versions of our coronavirus FAQ pages here, but we tried to condense all of this guidance into a new student guide that we'll be sharing with our newly admitted students as well as all of our colleagues. later today. But just so we can recap, ISPO this year is categorizing our new admits into 3 distinct groups. And these groups serve as indicators for issuance of their documents, eligibility to travel, what kind of classes, as Trisha explained earlier, they should register for, depending if they're inside or outside of the US, as well as employment authorization. And I know that many of our colleagues today are especially interested in enrollment and employment. And since Trisha briefly covered enrollment requirements for students who are outside of the US, we'll take a closer look at employment today. So just as a brief overview, depending on which student you are, A, B, or C, if you're already in the US, you're outside of the US planning to enter in the fall, or if you're outside of the US and you're planning to stay outside for the fall and enter in the winter when conditions permit, the type of immigration document you get from us when you travel, your enrollment and employment eligibility can differ. So it's quite a bit of information for students to really comb through, and we want to make sure that they're getting the right information as they prepare for fall. So we'll take a quick look at employment eligibility here. Employment eligibility is impacted by a student's location, which then tells us what their immigration status is, which then leads to what kind of work authorization they need, as well as payroll considerations the employer or UC San Diego should consider. During a student's program of study, they can engage in on-campus or off-campus employment. If you're an F1 student, off-campus employment is referred to as CPT. Those who are J1 students are academic training or AT. So after a graduation, students can engage also in work authorization through OPT for F1 students or AT, post-completion AT for J1 students. So just for our colleagues who are not too familiar with some of these terms, CPT for F1 students, AT for J1 students to refer to off-campus employment, and then OPT for work after graduation, AT for work for J1s after graduation as well. And a quick vanity URL, I worked at ucsd.edu if you want to learn more about these specific topics in depth. So I want to go over quickly pre-COVID times, understanding a student's timeline and when they begin to engage in these types of employment. So in normal times, students are eligible to begin on-campus employment up to 30 days prior to their program starting. So for those who start their programs in the fall, they can start on-campus employment, and this includes TA ships or GSRs as early as fall quarter or up to 30 days prior. Once a student has enrolled for 3 quarters, usually then they are able to start working off-campus. Okay, so when students enroll for 3 quarters, they then accrue what is called the 1-year academic requirement to begin working off campus. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And then once a student figures out that they're in their final quarter, if they wish to work after graduation, they would then apply for work after graduation, otherwise known as OPT for F1 students. So for off-campus work, during COVID-19, the regulations do allow that students work off campus through CPT. However, they do need to meet certain requirements. So the first is that they've received an offer from a US-based employer, or that the US-based employer has an office outside of the US and are able to monitor the engagement and the employment remotely. Also, that the student will receive credit for the course or engage in a cooperative education agreement. The student also has to hold an active SEVIS record. So this is an important point here, because depending on when they enter the US and begin their program of study, does let us know when their I-20 or their SEVIS record is eligible for activation. They have to have met the 1 academic year requirement, meaning they need to have enrolled 3 quarters on the same SEVIS ID number in active status. And their work has to be related to their program of study. So in normal times, most of our students are eligible to start accruing time towards the 1 academic year requirement in fall quarter. However, this year it will look a little bit different. So these two pieces here, the one academic year requirement, as well as holding an active SEVIS record, is really impacted because of COVID-19 and students' ability to enter the US this fall and start accruing time. Luckily, there is an exception specifically for graduate students who are able to engage in off-campus work through CPT prior to meeting the one academic year requirement. Unfortunately, for undergraduate students, there is no exception, so they will need to enroll in 3 quarters on an active SEVIS record prior to being eligible to work off campus. Okay, and I'm not going to go into this slide too much, but there are some students who, depending on their previous enrollment and non-immigrant statuses, have already accrued time towards their one academic year requirement. And so if students want to verify if they've done that, they can always check in with ISPO. So I want to go over understanding your timeline to work through CPT off campus. If a student starts their program in person this fall quarter, which we have a good amount of students doing, then we can activate their SEVIS record as early as fall quarter. They would then meet those 3-quarter requirements, and they would be able to then engage in off-campus employment as early as summer of 2021. So what happens if a student starts their program remotely this fall and does not arrive until winter? So their 3 quarters might look something like this. They would arrive in winter, we activate that SEVIS record, they enroll winter, spring. Summer is usually a vacation. If they would like to enroll full-time in the summer, which is 6 units in session 1 plus 6 units in session 2, or a total of 6 units in summer session 3, then they would be eligible to start off-campus employment as early as fall of 2021. However, for those who want to enjoy their summer and use fall as the 3rd quarter, they would not be able to avail off-campus employment through CPT until winter of 2022. Now, as I stated, there is an exception for graduate students. So any graduate student, regardless of if they enroll remotely or in person for the fall, as long as they enter the US and their SEVIS record is activated on or before spring of 2021, they would be able to avail off-campus employment through CPT as early as summer of 2021. If CPT also has 2 different types. We have course enrollment through CPT. We also have the summer co-op, only applicable during the summer of 2021 here. And depending on which type which type students will engage in, they may also need to make sure that they're enrolled in the fall quarter. Okay, and again, this is only available for graduate students. Undergraduate students do need to wait the 3 quarters on an active SEVIS record before being eligible for off-campus employment through CPT. Okay, so the new student guide will be published on inewstudents.ucsc.edu, and it does go over, those requirements that we just talked about for off-campus work, as well as what the start date should be on their immigration documents, their travel timeline, enrollment, and so forth. So we'll share this all with you as well once it's published. So now I want to go ahead and talk about on-campus employment and also pull in our colleagues from Graduate Division. The regulations do permit international students who are outside of the U.S. to engage in on-campus employment through either TA-ships, GSRs, and so forth. However, if the student hasn't entered the U.S. yet and we haven't activated that SEVIS record, then technically they're not holding F1 or J1 status. And so their eligibility to work isn't tied to their immigration status. They're then subject to the tax laws and labor laws that are applicable in their home country. Now, in terms of payment, how do we pay students who aren't here, who don't have a visa? Can we hire them? These are really good questions, and I know that our colleagues here at Graduate Division can go into those questions a bit more. So I'd like to now introduce Tiffany Sudersky to talk a little bit more about on-campus employment.
Good morning, everybody. So just right off the bat, I want to refer everyone to a notice that was sent out by the Dean of the Graduate Division on August 13th that has guidance and answers, or at least points us in the right direction for many of these questions. It is available on our Partner Collab site, and we will be sending it out again after this presentation. One thing to keep in mind for these ASE students, so first of all, jumping ahead a little bit, fellowship stipends are allowable and we will find a way to pay them. However, if you have a student who is fully remote and is new in fall 20, we recommend that you start with fellowship payment. It could be challenging for the reasons that ISPO has already gone into to hire new fall 20 students without that I-20 authorization. If you do decide to hire ASEs and GSRs who are remote, then do not have them enter into telework agreements. And we will be issuing letters for those positions that include this language that's been provided to us. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we are updating the various letters that will contain this information. And we do realize that some hires have already been made. We will be reissuing letters and will provide guidance on how to accomplish that as soon as we can. We're working with Labor Relations, our Academic Personnel Office, and ITS to make those changes available for everyone. Core Central Payroll, so Pearl Trinidad and her team, were in a meeting this morning at 8 o'clock with the system-wide PATH team to discuss some of the issues about how physically to disperse these payments to the students. So we know for sure that there will be an option to request an overnight check delivery via UPS. Pearl and her team are still working with the PATH team to figure out if we can wire student payments. We don't have an answer to this yet, and we don't have an ETA, and that lack of ETA is from the system-wide PATH team. So we will keep you updated as we hear more from Pearl and her team. We will also send out a couple of documents. So within the UC PATH Help Transactional Users section on the UC PATH website, there are 2 documents that students who are remote will need to fill out, and that is in the out-of-state income tax withholding form and also the foreign source income statement form. For the fee remissions, the tuition and fee remission requests related to employment positions, please continue to enter those into our financial support request tool. We recognize that there's a little bit of tricky timing here, but the most important thing is to get all of the requests collected via that tool so that we can sort of centrally manage them and make adjustments as needed. Next slide. Okay, so fellowship payments. In the August 13th guidance that was sent out, we did say you can pay fellowship stipends to students who are remote this year. As ISPO mentioned, the students fall sort of into 3 groups, and we're evaluating how to get payment to each of those 3 groups. We're working with SFS to make Western Union available as an option for all students who are continuing. The same domestic ACH and mailing check options will still be available. What we're also working to determine is if we can offer the Western Union to any continuing students who may have left the US. Again, please continue to enter all of these requests into the financial support request tool. You can go ahead and be descriptive in your comments if you have something you want us to pay attention to or a timing issue that we need to know about. Don't wait for your project task. If you've already submitted a request for a new project task to the general accounting and OFC teams, please go ahead and just enter that funding as new and leave us a note. We'll follow up with you. And regarding detail codes, I've had some questions about setting up detail codes, if that will expedite the process to getting the funding set up. And the answer is no, because we still have to work with another database tool that we use for financial support disbursement, ProSam. And unless we have those 2 things mapped so that they work well together, then we still can't issue payments. So please do just go ahead and put new funding in the financial support request tool, and we will help coordinate behind the scenes, even if we have to use a sort of temporary solution. Yes, please do use these roll accounts. So this is the fastest way to get to the folks in FSU who can answer your question. For any employment-related questions, grademployment@ucsd.edu, and then fellowship stipends and the associated fee payments, gradfellowships@ucsd.edu.
Great, thank you, Tiffany. Our graduate division colleagues will be staying as well after the presentation for our Q&A section if you have further questions. All right, so now let's go ahead and pivot to our continuing students. We've talked a great deal about our newly admitted students. There is some guidance also for our continuing students. So now I'd like to pass it to Tricia for some updates.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. Okay. So for our continuing students that are already inside the U.S. and have been in the U.S. and maintaining their status here, as SEVP has continued to provide more flexibility for our continuing students that were in the U.S. on March 9th, 2020. So in other words, those students who were enrolled at UCSD in the spring term and they're continuing into the fall term, they are eligible to enroll in a fully remote coursework if they wish, and they may be either inside the U.S. or outside the U.S. and continue to maintain their visa status. And then one final note, continuing students that are in their final quarter, so if they're graduating in the summer 20 or if they're planning to graduate in the fall 20, in order to apply for post-completion OPT to USCIS, they must apply from within the U.S. So if you're aware of any students that are in their final quarter, nearing their final quarter, they may want to consider traveling back to the U.S. To apply for OPT if they want to avail that benefit. Okay, thank you, Pauline.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tricia. Tricia, we want to talk about briefly filing fee? Students on filing fee for the fall quarter?
Yes. So for those graduate PhD students who will not be enrolled in their final quarter and they will only be paying filing fee in lieu of registration, those students may need to look into the option of enrolling if they're outside the U.S. So that they can request entry in order to, again, avail the OPT benefit to work after graduation. So if you're aware of any of filing fee students who are outside the U.S., you can refer them on to ISPO to discuss their options.
Perfect. Thank you, Tricia. Okay, and our last update here for you all is to give you all a preview of ISPO's orientation format this year. So go ahead and introduce Grace Fuller.
Hi, everyone. Like Pauline said, my name is Grace Fuller, and I'm the manager of student experience at ISPO. We are so excited to welcome our new incoming class of international students to San Diego. And we have completely redesigned new international student orientation to make sure it's inclusive and accessible to all of our incoming students. So we had some pre-orientation sessions that started on August 10th, and official international orientation will begin on September 8th and continue through September 18th. You'll see that we have multiple sessions, and in order to incorporate different time zones, we have them offered at multiple times. So this is to really make sure that no matter where the student is and no matter what their schedule might be, they can really participate and get the most out of international orientation this year. And we will continue to cover topics such as maintaining your status, employment authorization, travel and understanding your documents, as well as many sessions focused on intercultural communication as well as social connection to make sure that our students still get a chance to meet new people and start to create a community. If you are interested in having an ISPO representative at one of your orientations or welcome sessions, you can fill out the presentation request form noted on the screen. So again, this is for any sort of request to have someone from ISPO at any sort of session. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to contact me. My name is Grace Fuller, and we'll share our contact information at the end of it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Grace. All right, so we're at the end of our webinar here. So I'd like to go ahead now and answer some questions that we received from you all. I'd like to thank you all again for submitting those questions through chat, or I'm sorry, through the Q&A feature, and as well as during registration. So let me go ahead and let's see what questions we have today. Okay, so the first question here is for Tricia. Can F1 graduate students who start their programs remotely this fall and enter in the US in winter avail CPT in summer of 2021 if they have not yet met the one academic year requirement?
Yes, because we're talking about a graduate student that is entering in the winter. So again, remember there is an exception to the one academic year rule for graduate students.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, our next question is for Dulce. What can departments do to support students who need to show proof of in-person components for the fall course load?
Hi, Pauline. Okay, so as you know, the July 24th SEVP Guidance indicated that new students coming to the United States will have to be enrolled in at least one in-person or hybrid course. We understand that many of our graduate students may be taking a research course or an independent study course. Based on UC legal guidance and also ISPO's interpretation, those courses would be eligible to fulfill the one in-person or hybrid course. But however, we do understand that there is some risk because U.S. Customs and Border Protection may not allow a student to enter based on having an independent study or research course. Therefore, what we're recommending is that the student receive documentation from the department about the in-person component of a course. This could be course summary or a syllabus or a letter from the department that states that the research course or the independent study course has an in-person component. Some of the students may be requesting this of your offices, so we hope that you will consider supporting the students in this endeavor.
Thank you, Dulce. Okay, the next question that we have is for Gabi. If we come across a student who is located in a sanctioned country, who should we direct them to? How can departments help students adjust enrollment plans if located in a sanctioned country?
Yes, so if you come across any students who are from one of these sanctioned countries that we went over earlier, please contact ISPO. We're working closely with export control on campus to work out the students' options. Right now, because it is a lengthy process to apply for an export license for someone to enable them to take online courses from a sanctioned country, the most realistic option really for that student is to defer their studies until they can physically arrive in the United States or at least be in a country that does not have these sanctions applied to it. But we still would encourage you to contact us because we can let export control know. They are in the process of investigating export licenses and a timeline. So it will be important to have all of us involved to best advise the student in that case.
Perfect. Thank you, Gabi. Okay. The next one is for Dulce. In the event that UC San Diego's operational plan moves to fully online, how does this impact newly admitted students who are planning to seek entry into the US? And how does this impact those who have already entered the US to start their programs this fall?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question because I know, like many of us, we're probably all monitoring how our colleagues at other campuses around the country are faring in terms of their starts, especially those that are on the semester schedule. Keep in mind that in the July 24th Student Exchange Visitor Program guidance, it does state that non-immigrant students who are pursuing studies in the United States for the fall 2020 school term may remain in the United States, even if their educational institutions, so in this case, if UCSD switches from hybrid to fully online instruction. So therefore, based on this current guidance, at this time, students will maintain their non-immigrant status and would not be required to depart the United States. Of course, as long as they're otherwise maintaining their status with all of the other requirements.
Okay, thank you, Dulce. Okay, and another question for you, Dulce. Excuse me. If a department does not offer in-person courses, what information and assistance can be provided to international students?
What we're telling our students right now is to really work closely with their department or the college in terms of trying to identify courses. Again, the spreadsheet that Institutional Research has created will identify which courses are available and identify which ones are in person, hybrid, or remote. And then because it's updated 3 times a week, you'll be able to see like how many students are enrolled in those courses. I do know that in the Q&A tool, someone did mention that some of the JSOE colleagues can't access the tool because you're using the Google platform. So we're going to be looking into that to see how you can access that document. But in general, we're asking our students to reach out to their departments to see what options are available. Again, you can also look into potentially research, independent study, some of the seminar courses. So as long as there's an in-person component, that would meet that requirement. The second thing that I would like to inform everybody is that we're also trying to survey all of our international students that we're expecting to arrive in the fall. We're prioritizing those that have requested I-20s and are expecting to arrive in September. And then we're continuing to narrow down that list then to make sure that they fulfilled all of the admission requirements. So working with the graduate division and admissions. So that way we'll have a core group of students that we can identify and prioritize to make sure that those students have options for in-person or hybrid courses.
Perfect. Thank you, Dulce. I know we have a few questions that have been submitted here through the Q&A feature regarding payroll. So Tiffany, our colleagues here at Grad Division, maybe we want to answer a few of these here. Let's see. If I'm understanding this right, you're saying students can work for the university remotely, even if they don't have an updated F1. How do we enter in UC Path then? Because they require a signed I-9 form, where we have to enter valid F1 I-20 work permit and date.
Hi, Regina. So I guess I need to understand if the student, if they don't have an F1, these are new students, I'm sorry, an I-20. These are brand new students, or are they continuing students, right? I would refer you to ISPO's guidance on what the valid work permit allows. And then if they are not allowed to begin working, then to consider the fellowship stipend.
Maybe I can add to that, Tiffany, that my understanding of the I-9 is that is a form that is required to verify work eligibility for an individual that is inside the U.S. So if this question is regarding a student that is working for the university remotely and is outside the U.S., then I guess this question then for Tiffany is, do they need to sign an I-9 form? If it's an individual that is going to be working remotely outside the US, regardless of whether they have an I-20 or not.
We'll check in with payroll about that specific question because it sounds like that was not as clear in the information that we were given. So we've taken that question down and we're going to check in with HR and we'll send out an update to everyone.
Great. Thank you, Tiffany and Tricia. Okay, we have time for a few more here. So the next one is for Gabi. Students who cannot enter the US by October 16th, which is the end of week 2 of the fall quarter, what do you recommend they do? Should they defer to winter quarter?
Yeah, so we recommend for students who cannot enter by the end of week 2, if students are already, of course, enrolled in courses online or hybrid that allow them to continue those in an online format, they can continue to do so for the fall, but we would recommend they remain outside the United States. They do not attempt entry after the 16th. Or if the student was enrolled in any in-person courses that required their attendance on campus, that they should defer their program start date to the winter or the spring, whichever works best for the student. But we would not recommend that they enter the United States after the date, the end of week 2, October 16th. There could be complications entering after this date with the start dates that they have on their I-20 documents.
Thank you, Gabi. Okay, we have one more question for Tiffany here. I understand the fellowship component, but I am not sure if I understood the process is different for students who work in a lab and receive a stipend.
So this one's a little challenging for me just because I can't interact directly with you, but I will put this in terms of how you would process it. So if the stipend for the student who would work in a lab is something that you would typically process through the financial support request tool, follow that same process. If there's a sort of another category of stipend that you're processing somehow through UC Path, then I would get in contact directly with our employment team to ask a more specific question.
Great, thank you, Tiffany. Okay. So it looks like we are nearing the end of our webinar here. I'd like to thank our colleagues at Graduate Division for joining us today and answering these really important questions. We'll be sending this presentation and any applicable links to you all, to attendees, and also post on iwebinars.ucsd.edu. I'd like to thank you all for attending and hope you all stay safe and healthy. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.